Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of Pokemon Ruby Nuzlocke. In the last episode, Maxie and his hired thugs were defeated, and in this episode I'll finish most of the game. I'm using my serious tone as Hoenn is going through a heat wave, and all is there left to do is to finish the game's limited plot. I prepared my team and I'm ready for the imminent battle. Just need to head to the back and head to the Cave of Origin. Inside the Cave of Origin, aside the major fight, there is not really much to say here. The only thing you can counter here are Zubats and the HM for Waterfall, which seems odd that Pokemon games have a tradition that one HM is found in-game instead of an NPC. In order to traverse, you're going to need the HM flashed or navigate in low visibility. In terms of Pokemon Special, this is the actual locale of all that magma fighting that erupted into a huge explosion I mentioned last episode. After the explosion, Ruby and Sapphire ended up in a small island that was a void in time and space, where a former Sootopolis gym leader Hoenn makes his debut along with Tate and Liza, who he rescued. It is found that Ruby and Sapphire absorbed the orbs and were in the island to train in a last-ditch effort to use the orbs and control the legendary Pokemon. The two were about to head out to fight until Ruby took the decision off Sapphire's hands. I find it interesting that here Ruby is facing the legendary Pokemon without Sapphire, just like in Pokemon Special. There is a reason for that, but I will elaborate later. For now, it is time to fight. We have here is a fight with Groudon. This Pokemon is extremely powerful and a major threat. When entering the battle, it uses the ability Drought, which causes it to be sunny throughout the fight. I'm going to be honest here and say I went into this fight and attempt to catch it just to add difficulty to me. As you can see, I immediately regretted that decision. Groudon is a ground Pokemon with high attack and defense and knows Earthquake, which is stab, and will wreck most things. The plan was to wall it with ESP screens and use Viridi to paralyze it since Phosphor wouldn't be able to due to immunity to electricity. Seeing how much damage he did, I resorted to my backup plan by using the best wall in the game, Dusclops. The fight here did drag on, and so I decided to speed it up. Dusclops is a great Pokemon because he's immune to Slash, and with its ability Pressure, Groudon is using up PP twice as fast. In order to keep up with Groudon using Bulk Up, I used X defense so he could not sweep me. Aside from Earthquake, the Drought increases Groudon's Fire Blast, and as an added problem, it is able to buff up its stats with Bulk Up. If you're playing the Sapphire version, then you get Kyogre that excels in Special Attack and Special Defense, and will use Calm Mind to buff up those stats. If you want an easier time, I recommend getting the TM for Rain Dance inside the abandoned ship to remove the Drought, and a Pokemon with Levitate that would give it immunity to ground. If you believe things are turning sour, you can always have the option to run, or if you want to catch it, you can always use the Master Ball. Due to Groudon having increased defense, I used Nightshade that ignores stat buffs to make solid damage and whittle it down with Shadow Punch. I made an attempt to get into the red and use a Timer Ball which grows in strength as turn passes, but as I got Groudon to red, he ended up dying to a critical hit. It was worth a shot, but nothing could be done about it. So, cutting ahead. Now that I'm done with the giant Groudon, it is time for the gym and prepare for combat. In Sootopolis Gym, the gimmick is ice puzzles where you have to walk through all the panels one time before reaching the end. If not, what happens is you fall through and you have to fight Wallace's team of cheerleaders underground, ready to take a shot at you. During this speed up, I wanted to talk about a few details that I omitted in Sootopolis and something fun in the middle. In this city is where the two legendary Pokemon were fighting. While Ruby and Sapphire were training, Wallace and the gym leaders, minus Norman, were holding off the legendary Pokemon. The problem looked dire until Hoenn's Elite Four and its champion Steven took on the Pokemon. In the Emerald version, Wallace is the champion and you fight Wallace's master Hoenn instead, which Pokemon Special elaborates on this a bit. Apparently Wallace was already champion and then he refused the title because he wanted to be with someone he cared about. Wallace tries to be odd by denying it. Speaking of odd, what I wanted to show was this. In 3rd generation, there's a glitch that can happen when you use Thunderbolt. Essentially, the Thunderbolt sound gets stuck in a loop, making a jarring sound. Please excuse the sound here, but due to how rare this happens, I needed to show this. The only way to fix it is turning the game on and off, which is one of the many bad things that just happen here. Anywho, Steven entrusted Wallace with his cape, which signifies the champion, as it seems something was about to happen. Which makes me wonder if you stole it, do you legitimately become champion? Who knows. It was then after fighting the legendary Pokemon, the Elite Four and Steven ended up having trouble, and so ended up using some code that Steven got back in Dewford to summon a trio of legendary Pokemon that the Elite Four used to hold back Kyogre and Groudon. After a drawn-out fight, Ruby came out of the time vortex with not Sapphire, but Marge of Team Magma instead to confront Groudon and Kyogre. In my opinion, I found that segment great, just because you would think in the end the main characters be beating the legendary Pokemon, and instead they made a right turn and used minor characters to play larger roles. Probably why Marge is one of my personal favorites. I kinda think the manga writers thought so too based on how much of a role she plays. Too bad she never appears in Emerald, as she had a bigger impact than Shelly. As to what reason why Ruby was with Marge, I'll explain a bit more later. But for now, it's time for the gym. We have here is a gym battle. Wallace has 5 Pokemon and is actually pretty hard trainer to fight. He starts out with Lovedis. This Pokemon is basically a joke just because of its horrible stats. If you want to set up on Wallace, you can use this one to do so. Just be careful as it knows attacks which will make male Pokemon have trouble. Also Flail, which becomes powerful if you leave it weak. It should be no problem as a solid electric attack should do the job. Wallace's second Pokemon is Whiscash. This thing is a ground water type, meaning electric moves won't work. To add to it, this Guppy knows Earthquake that'll wreck any electric threats. This Pokemon is a very strong defensive tank and will take a bit to defeat. Right here was a bit of a stall fest where both of our water ground types kept chipping away at each other's health and just healing back up. When fighting it, I recommend grass moves and it is 4 times weak to it. Just make sure it does not use Amnesia too much as it is to counter that weakness. I was going to use Viridi, but after the strong Earthquake and it being low level, I doubt it would survive the hit. I recommend using a tank against this tank. Wallace's third Pokemon is Celio. This is a water ice type that is very defensive and has the thick fat ability, meaning it will take little damage to fire and ice, even though in general using those types would be a bad idea. Right here it is using Wallace's signature move, which is Water Pulse. It is a pretty strong attack that has a 20% chance of causing confusion. It also knows Body Slam for physical attacks and Encore to prevent you from setting up. I recommend using an electric Pokemon or even fighting would do it, as ice types have several weaknesses in general. Just make sure his Aurora Beam doesn't cause a freeze, as it means you can't move and are pretty useless at that point. Wallace's fourth Pokemon is Seeking, and the vein in my existence. Normally this Pokemon is not much of a problem, but the issue is with its move pool. Seeking has the ability Swift Swim, meaning that when it's in rain, it doubles its speed and will likely go first. This Pokemon has two priorities with its AI, which is to have Rain Dance stay up and try to finish off opponents with Horn Drill. Horn Drill is a one-hit KO move that is 30% accurate and a really dangerous move in a Nuzlocke challenge. What I wanted to do was to reduce its accuracy so I could switch in Phosphor. At this point, its accuracy was at half, and to not risk losing Phosphor during a switch-in, I stayed with Fenrir. Also, I wanted Rain Dance to expire so that Wallace's last Pokemon could not take the advantage. The fight looked like it was in the bag until the great god of luck gave Wallace its blessing, and as usual, ready to spit in my face, forcing me to lose my beginning partner I had through the whole journey. I'm gonna be honest here, I had a lot of bad luck on this run. I've missed 95% accurate tackles a lot, I've glitched the game, had critical hits including a self-destruct, almost killed me several times, and had capture fails due to critical hits. I'm usually fine with all that, with no rage, but that just takes the hypothetical cake. A -2 accuracy Horn Drill landing a hit at 15% chance just means this game wanted something dead. At this point I was peeved and went offensive with Phosphor, and Wallace moved on to his final Pokemon, Milotic. I mentioned before how powerful this thing is and with good stats and a good move pool. At the start I used Thunder Wave to cripple it despite activating its signature ability Marvel Scale. What it does is its defense goes up while having a status infliction. To me it didn't matter as the best way to attack it is to use special moves. Milotic as a Pokemon is a staller. It can take hits easily and on top of that knows Recover to drag this fight. After losing Fenrir and knowing Wallace's Milotic would definitely outlast Phosphor, I decided to use my trump card, which was Spifla. I ended up taking a page out of Watson's strategy book and used a method known as Parafusion. This means with Paralysis and Confusion, Milotic only has a 25% chance to make a move. On top of that, I stacked the Ghost Pokemon's unique infliction, which is Curse. By sacrificing half my HP, Milotic will be losing 25% HP each turn, so that no matter what Wallace tried, nothing will help. It was a big gamble as it meant Spifla was within range to be killed, but fortunately I survived the turn and I just really needed to do was heal. His Milotic being a star would not last long as I crippled it with status inflictions and made it slowly lose away its health. In terms of difficulty, Wallace is a pain and should warrant caution. If you're playing the Emerald version, you'll end up fighting Hoenn, whose main threat is Kingdra, and is only weak to Dragon and spans Double Team like no tomorrow. I recommend using Odor Slot to counter this or Aerial Ace, which you can pick up from Monona. But after a long fight and getting some payback, I defeated Wallace. Now that I'm done with all the gyms, it's time to head back and pay respect to my fallen comrade in arms. Also, I need to weigh my options as what I can use for Pokemon for the last stretch of the game. So, cutting ahead. Now that I'm back in Moss Deep and rearranged my team, I decided to catch a Pokemon in an area that did not go before. The area above Moss Deep is called Shoal Cave. It is an optional area that its layout differs based on the time, making it low or high tide. In here you can find an ice Pokemon which will help you if you need one for the Elite Four. The plan was to catch a pseudo replacement for Fenrir, but instead I got a Pokemon I was not fond of, which is Zubat. I mentioned before Zubat is a fast flying Pokemon that is decent in stats and honestly loses usefulness pretty fast. I recommend using it only if you need a flying Pokemon as they are pretty common in the later game. I decided to catch it just to add options so what I can use it for the very end. As to the rules, I decided to call it Batty since it drives me insane. So, cutting ahead. Now that I'm done with all the gyms, I need to head to the final destination, which is Victory Road and the Elite Four. To get there, all you need to do is surf south of Moss Deep and make a right. You'll find a ton of trainers, which I off-screen fought most of them just to save on time. You're gonna need a Pokemon with Waterfall for the final area, as it is required. During the rest of the speed up, I want to talk about how the tale of Hoenn ends, and elaborate a bit on the cryptic things I spoke about. As I said earlier, Ruby was with Marge to fight Groudon in Cairo. The reason was during the training session Ruby and Sapphire had, Sapphire finally confessed and expressed her feelings for him. Ruby had felt the same and was the reason why he left her out of the fight. Ruby was approached by Marge asking him for help, realizing Maxie's plan was not going to work and would just lead to chaos. To protect Sapphire, Ruby agreed, and the two harnessed the power of the orbs to suppress the legendary Pokemon. They did their best, but the rage of hundreds of years was too great and only delayed the inevitable. The fight caused Marge to get trapped under a rock slide, and she ended up just accepting her fate. Ruby was not willing to let her go and tried to harness the power of the orbs on his own. Everything looked helpless until Norman arrived riding on the last legendary Pokemon, Rayquaza. The duo rode onto it in style, fighting Groudon and Cairo, and after weakening the trio, Ruby landed the final blow on them, and they ended up going underground. After the dust settled, Norman and Steven to a lesser extent looked wiped out after using a legendary Pokemon's power, while Marge got dragged by Archie of Team Aqua's Tentacruel, and with her last bit of strength passed on her final memories into her lighter using a gum balloon and then died. It was revealed that Marge used to do contests as a child with her best friend Daisy Oak, aka Blue Sister. She always wanted to be with Ruby and close to him. Because she cared so much, she took the time to infiltrate Moss Deep Space Center to reveal to Ruby the main reason why he had issues with his father, which was because the Pokemon that escaped when he was a child was, in fact, Rayquaza, and Norman took responsibility for it and spent his time to find it just to protect his son and his family. Ruby confronted Norman about it, finding him in bad shape. Norman explained it to him that he did it the same reason Ruby left Sapphire out, or as to why Marge even helped Ruby in general. After that, both Steven and Norman died. Afterwards, Maxie and Archie popped out trying to start the conflict all over again. Sapphire and any gym leaders that remained came out to stop them. In the end, Ruby sent the two flying, making sure they did not die, as he had enough deaths happen in one day. At the end, one more issue remained, which was the orbs. They were emitting energy, warping time and space that's set to explode and kill everyone like a black hole exploding. It looked like the end until Ruby pulled an ace up his sleeve by using a Pokemon he kept secret about the whole time, which was Celebi. Responding to Ruby's wishes, Celebi halted the stones, warping reality around Ruby, saving not only everyone around, but prevented the deaths of Steven, Marge, and Norman. The world was saved, and Ruby and Sapphire raced off to finish the 80-day deadline that Sapphire had set up because it was going to be her birthday. And it seems she wanted to be champion at the same age as Generations 1 Red. Everyone in the story went off to live their lives, and Ruby and Sapphire went home to celebrate Sapphire's birthday. I will say, in terms of entries of Pokemon Special, I personally love how the story went in a way that made it unpredictable and showed great depth in its characters. I must admit, the bit with the Celebi was a bit far-fetched, but seeing how it is Pokemon, I guess I could excuse it. I spoke before as to why I decided to do Ruby instead of Emerald, and I will leave that and my final thoughts for the finale. Now that I'm done covering the tale of Hoenn, it is time for one last fight. Hey look, it's Wally! Forgot about you. We have here is a battle with Wally. He has 5 Pokemon and it's actually pretty tough. For reference, Wally is that kid that Ruby met way back in Petalburg's gym and in the forest, and then later on in Verturf Town. Essentially, Wallace was a frail kid with asthma that went through the journey to get better and eventually get stronger. He starts off with Altaria, in which if you have the Ice Beam TM, then it should be quick work on this one. Just be careful as Altaria knows Dragon Dance, and leaving it like that will give it rain to set up. If you're wondering as to how he got so strong, well, the game explains it that Ruby inspired him to get better and off-screen trained. Also, just like Maxie, how Wally heals is another oddity as he uses super potions only. In terms of Wally's significant jump in his Pokemon's levels, Pokemon Adventures Special made an effort to explain that large gap. What had happened is during the whole Groudon and Kyogre incident, Wally was in Pacific Log Town, which is a town we have not been to, and during a rainstorm, Norman found him and seeing Wally's bravery, decided to train him. Norman took him to an area full of powerful Pokemon where he had to climb several flights of stairs and ride a bike through collapsing forest so he could be physically stronger and strengthen his team. If only I had such a luxury. I'm stuck with just the interview circuit and he gets to go to an area I can't go yet. Wallace's second Pokemon is Delcatty. This is pretty much a wildcard Pokemon as it has moves to add statuses and debuffs, while using a move called Assist, which literally puts a random move from its team and uses it. It tries to use Sing to put you to sleep, which is a horrible, inaccurate move. Though I recall there was an instance that I was put to sleep 5 times in a row by a similarly inaccurate move as well. Especially with all the bad luck that seems to happen with me. Delcatty is not really that strong, just be aware of Feint Attack as it is a dark move and bad news for Ghosts and Psychic. I actually find it amusing that Delcatty has a dark move and has yet to use it in all this time, especially with Cursing Effect. The last thing Wally should be doing is trying to stall me out. Right there was the move Assist taking effect. It looks like Wally used his Grass Pokemon's move instead of using a dark move. Of all the battles I've been through, it just baffles the mind on what Wally's doing. Sure, he has gotten lucky with the Sings, but now it's just dead. Wally's third Pokemon is Roselia. This Pokemon is of some concern as its move pool is meant to stall and weaken opponents slowly. Right here it used Leech Seed, which takes 1/16 of your health each turn. On top of that, it knows Toxic, which will also take another 1/16 times the number of turns that stay active. Interesting enough, the combination used to be a glitch in Generation 1 and 2. Apparently the value used to calculate damage from Leech Seed and Toxic were the same, and so having both active meant Toxic and Leech Seed would gradually drain more health than they were meant to be. A similar thing happens when stacking weather effects when Hail and Sandstorm are used at the same time. Of all the issues the game mechanics 3rd gen had, I'm glad they removed that glitch. Just so Roselia could not continue draining, I used Robin to clean up as Flying Test should be able to handle the job, also having Confusion to reduce his chances of pulling a move. Roselia has decent offensive stats, but any flying move should make quick work of it. Just don't stall it out as it will regenerate health pretty fast. Wally's fourth Pokemon is Magneton. This Pokemon is pretty decent. Not really a good move pool though. Right here, since it has been a while, I wanted to use Double Team to increase my motivation to make quick work on Wally's last Pokemon. Of course, making a flying going out against an electric was not exactly a smart move. Not sure what the heck I was thinking there. I decided to try Hell to take advantage of its weakness to fire, but however, it was clear the difference in level was going to be an issue. Not to mention the para hacks. If you want to train up for the last part of the game, the best way to gain levels is to fight what is called the interview circuit, which is with Gabby and Ty. They rotate locations from north of Maudville to east of Maudville, past the water, and east of Fort Tree. The duo end up having fully evolved Pokemon at level 39 and will net you a ton of cash and experience. If EVs are what you're after and understand what you want, then I'll leave a guide on the right showing the best spots for a particular stat in a specific location. With very little options, I went with Phosphor to make this a battle between electric Pokemon. I was a bit concerned just because of the off chance of a critical hit. Also, another thing that came in mind was Magneton's ability, which makes it so electric Pokemon can't switch out. Hence why I was trying to avoid using it. Another thing to be concerned is that Magneton knows Tri-Attack, which has 30% chance to inflict freeze, burn, or paralysis. And knowing my luck, it would probably just get the freeze, making things harder. In the end, both of us were just spamming Thunderbolt just to try to outlast the other. Right here, Wally healed up, and since it was obvious, I healed up here too. Especially since my next turn I would be faster anyways. The only thing that annoyed me was that he kept surviving with just a sliver of health. Not to mention he pulled off a Confusion at the very end. Well, at least my Parahacks finally came in and I could finally finish off this giant magnet. Wally's last Pokemon is Gardevoir. This is a powerful psychic Pokemon and potentially the biggest problem you'll have to deal with. I started with Thunder Wave to get the status. It did mean I would be getting it as well, as Gardevoir's ability has it that the opponent gets as well. The reason is I went with it is because Wally was being cheap and trying to use Double Team to increase its evasion. This way his Pokemon would be untouchable and free to set up Calm Mind and wreck my team. Instead, I removed my status and used the underused Move's Odor Slot to counter its evasion. To me, it seems a waste of an attack slot, but so many Pokemon in Hoenn use Double Team, which is another gripe I have with this game. Having to counter the game being cheap. Yeesh. Funny enough, this is the only time you run into a Gardevoir, and yet this one is an oddity. If you look closer, you can see that this Gardevoir is a male. The odd part is that past Generation 3, all Gardevoirs can only be female. The reason is they added an evolution for a male counterpart, and so any male Gardevoir are properly known as Surnites. I'm not sure if Surnites can be passed down to 6th gen, but it would be interesting to see. Right here it seems Gardevoir was already very strong, and it almost finished Phosphor in one move. Thankfully the AI is not really good, as it could have ended this fight a while ago. In terms of difficulty, Wally is hard, but the AI is weird for him. I would suggest not letting him set up, and he should be fine. However, with that, I managed to defeat Wally. Like that, he says goodbye. If the game clock works, you can re-challenge him, but for me, I can't, so it's goodbye forever. After a long trip, I'm at the Elite Four, but before handing it off here, I wanted to show one last final random encounter. Please excuse the aspect ratio in this segment, as my capture device got weird on me and came out a bit smaller. If you've been paying attention, I skipped Meteor Falls, and the reason is I wanted to come back here once I had Waterfall. The reason is that in the back is the TM for Dragon Claw. Also, there's one unique Pokemon here that I was hoping to catch. Just be careful of the Dragon Tamer, as he is pretty strong. In the Emerald version, you get an extra fight here after defeating the Elite Four and Champion, but since this is Ruby, I don't need to. For my final unique encounter, it is Bagon. Bagon is a powerful Pokemon. It evolves into a powerful Dragon type with high stats across the board and can learn a fairly large move pool. The only drawback is that it requires a ton of experience to raise, just like all Dragon Pokemon in general. If you manage to get lucky enough to encounter it, I highly recommend it. I believe with all this misfortune I've had, I think this makes up for it. Also, just for fun, I ended up chucking Nest Balls, which work on weaker Pokemon that you can get in Verdanturf, and make hearts come out of your Pokemon. I do admit it was being stubborn, but with me, I was not risking even attacking it. I was just going to be chucking Nest Balls for a while. Interesting, so it forced itself to evolve into being able to fly. In accordance to the rules, I decided to call it Midgard, a Norse dragon of legend. Okay, with that, I will end it here. Next time on Pokemon Ruby Nuzlocke, I will finish the rest of the game. Until then, see you later. Bye bye!